Hey guys, how's it going? I hope everyone is having a great day today. Today I have a new scene for you, something different. It's not my studio, so it is kind of fresh outside and I kind of wanted to switch up the environment and enjoy the fresh weather that nature has today. When you first pick up a camera and you want to learn videography, there's a few things to keep in mind, and there's a few things that even as you grow, a lot of these mistakes are still being made. I would know because I would make these mistakes even a few months to a year after I think I learned everything about a camera, I was still making. So today I want to talk about some tips and maybe some mistakes that I've seen along the way, and hopefully they help you to not make those mistakes. So the very first one that I want to talk about is to learn all your camera formats, and that goes for 24p, 30p, and 60p. We won't really get into 120 and 240p because those are kind of niche frame rates and not a lot of people will use them, but also not a lot of cameras will have those. So I'm gonna try to stick within the main three, and the first one is the 24 frames, and 24 frames is usually something you would want to shoot if you're doing a short film, maybe some documentary work and movies. A lot of movies are in 24p. Then you have 30p or 30 frames per second, which is usually going to be more of a soap opera feel. Maybe news channels use it, but something that you're probably more familiar with is going to be TikTok Reels, YouTube Shorts, and kind of social media videos in general. They tend to be in the 30 frames per second range. Then you have 60 frames, which is going to be more for that hyper realistic feel that you're going for, or what most people are going to be shooting 60p is going to be for sports. Maybe you want to slow down the motion of a football or a basketball, or maybe you want to get B-roll for a wedding. So 60p usually is going to be known as the slow motion frame rate that you want to use. 120, again, if you just keep going higher, you can use it as slow motion, but it's just gonna be even more of a slower motion. So it's if you really want to capture very fast things. Typically 24, 30, and 60 are going to be what most people are using. So it's important to know why you're using them and when to use them. You don't want to use 60 frames if you're shooting a cinematic short film, because then it won't give you that same feeling, whereas if you shoot in 24 frames. So it's important to know when and why you're shooting them, and that would pretty much be the first tip. The next tip is to use the right shutter speed. Why this is important is because if you don't use the right shutter speed, you're often gonna get unnatural motion blur. So if you go 1/1000, then when you do this, you're gonna get more of a choppy look, which is gonna hurt your eyes, and it's even gonna just not look natural. Whereas if you go lower of a shutter speed, so 1/10, you're gonna get way too much motion blur. So it's important to know that you're using the right shutter speed, and typically that's gonna be double your frame rate. So right now I'm shooting at 30 frames per second, so I'm actually at 1/50. I'm not even following my own rule, but I am at 1/60 now. Okay, yeah, so it's gonna be double your frame rate. So if you're shooting 30 frames, then you want to be at 1/60. If you're shooting 60 frames, you're gonna be at 1/120. But I don't know if there's 120. I think it's 125. So you always just round up if the number's not there. But it's important to know that you are shooting in the right shutter speed, because then the footage looks mediocre or just unprofessional. So one thing to note is that I do have a variable ND filter. Variable ND filters are sunglasses for your camera. So if I was to take it off, it would be very bright. Currently I'm at f4 because I have the 16 to 35. But if I was at a 1.8, it'd be very, very bright. Everything would be blown out. And I know most people do want to shoot at the lowest aperture. So in order to do that, you're going to need to invest in a ND filter, preferably a V ND filter, which is a variable ND filter. So that way you can move from the different NDs, whatever it's called. So variable ND filters will help you get that lower aperture while still having the correct shutter speed. So that's one thing that I have noticed, is that people often want the 1.8 or 2.8 shutter aperture, but they're compensating by raising their shutter speed to 1/500, 1/1000, whatever it is, and I notice it because I see the very choppy motion blur, and it almost hurts my eyes. I don't know if other people pick it up. Sometimes I ask my girlfriend, and she says she does pick it up, but I don't know if she's just saying that or if she's saying it because I'm telling her that it looks choppy. So again, I don't know, but I do know that learning it now, I can see when the videos are choppy. When I first started videography, I actually was doing music, which I'm still doing music, but I made my first music video and I published it and everything, and then it wasn't until a few months later that I looked back at it and I'm like, why does it hurt my eyes? And I was like, I used the wrong shutter speed. And it made sense because at the time, like, I was using the wrong shutter speed. I didn't know to use the right shutter speed. So it was a mistake I made, and now I know. But a side tip while talking about shutter speed is drone footage. So please don't shoot your drone footage in a high shutter speed either. It's the same thing as a camera. Shoot in the proper shutter speed, get that natural motion blur, and get some ND filters. Invest in some. It's like $50. I think it was like $50 for the one I have, the set that I have, and it just helps. It helps that much. It gives you that more natural feeling. I know before, again, I was shooting the music video with the wrong shutter speed. Same thing with this one. With the drone, I was shooting the wrong shutter speed, and it looked choppy. And I'm like, why does it look like this? Like, I couldn't understand. And it was that I needed to lower the shutter speed and get some ND filters. So make sure to use the right shutter speed, please. So the next tip kind of coincides with the one we just talked about, and that is always shooting in the lowest aperture. So same thing, shooting in the wrong shutter speed because I wanted to shoot in a lower aperture. I wanted to get that blurry background, and sometimes it calls for it because you don't have enough light, so you do need to shoot with the lowest aperture to get the nice blurry background, but also the low light capabilities. But sometimes you don't need to, and instances when I started making my short film recently, and if you haven't checked it out, I will put that in the link down below. Please go ahead and watch it. All these tips are definitely being used in that short film. I do appreciate if you did watch it. But one thing I did do was I did not shoot in the lowest aperture hardly in any of the shots, if not maybe one. And what I learned is that sometimes that depth of field that you have, whether it's 1.2, 1.4, 1.8, you might need more. And I really noticed it when I was shooting commercial videos for food. And I'm like, oh, I'm shooting at 1.2, but half the food, if not even more of the food, is blurry. It's not even in focus. And that's because the depth of field is so shallow. So of course I had to bump it up to 2.8 and sometimes even f4. And that's kind of the first time that I noticed that I don't need to be shooting at the lowest aperture all the time. In fact, that is the first thing that I was always doing, and now I'm trying to revert into using other apertures and understand how much needs to be in focus. Kind of goes back on the tip that we had just talked about. They kind of coincide together. Just try not to shoot in the lowest aperture all the time. You know, test yourself, give yourself some boundaries of, hey, maybe I'm gonna shoot everything in f4 and see how that looks. With that being said, these next two are actually not internally of the camera, but they are about the camera. So this next one is to lock your shots. And what locking your shots does is it helps you, if not forces you, to be more creative. If you have a shot locked off, then you have to really focus on what the scene is entailing. What are you doing in the scene? What is it that you're trying to achieve? What are you speaking towards your audience about? You can definitely benefit from blocking your shots and focusing more on the creative aspect of your shot. And again, I did do this in, I think every shot of my short film, whereas I've never been used to that. I've always been the one to have my gimbal. So this one was the first one that I kind of wanted to dive into, just locking my shots and thinking, okay, how am I going to introduce this shot? There's not really much to say about it. I would say just try to lock your shots off. Again, limit yourself in certain boundaries, and you'll realize that there's a lot more things that you can come up with on the spot when you're limited to certain boundaries. So on the other end, I do understand that handheld shots do have a place in here, but it is important to know how to walk with the camera. So this next tip would be the ninja walk, and it's important to learn how to do the ninja walk, and I'll be putting footage up here to showcase to you how the ninja walk looks. But pretty much you want to learn this ninja walk because it's going to help you get the least amount of resistance or rumble in your shots, as opposed to just walking stagnant, and you're going to get all those bumps in each step that you take. So it's important to go heel to toe, heel to toe, heel to toe, as you see in this example. It helps give you the most steady amount of footage that you can possibly get when hand-holding or or holding hands, whatever it's called. But yeah, these two are kind of opposites of each other, right? So on one end I'm telling you lock your shot, and then on the other end I'm telling you to learn to ninja walk. And it's like, oh, but they're like opposites of each other. And it's true, they kind of are opposites of each other, but learning both definitely gives you a diverse and dynamic form of getting your shots versus just always having it on a gimbal. So with that being said, those are kind of just like the little tips that I had, some things that I've seen along the way, that mistakes that I've made. I do have 2 more tips, and these are probably the most important tips that I could give you, but they do need their own video because of how great and granular that they are. And that is to learn lighting and audio. And trust me, if you are able to master these 2, lighting and audio, it doesn't matter what camera you have, it doesn't matter if your footage is blurry. Well, it kind of does, right? It kind of does, but those things don't matter as much if you have very good lighting and very good understanding of audio. Those are usually the things that people lack. And I have been noticing a lot more, like especially on Instagram Reels, that people are really going into this crazy transitions and and like it's cool and all. Like I like it because it's a style. But when you're talking about filmmaking, it's important that the sounds that you're using are adding to your film and not just distracting you from the overall message of whatever it is that you're trying to say. So yeah, I mean, if you guys would like a video on lighting and audio, or even one video on lighting and one video on audio, comment down below. I'd love to make a video, but I want to know if you guys are interested in seeing something like that. I do hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure that you guys are getting after it. If you haven't shot photos in a while, go shoot photos. If you're working on a business deal with someone, make sure you get that business deal. And with that being said, that is the end of this video. And if you guys do have any questions or any comments, any concerns, opinions, go ahead and drop them down below. And that'll be it. Thank you. I'm out.